Gentlemen, thanks. The first thing you do after the briefing is when you get ready to step to your aircraft, is you give it a nice little pat. Because these babies, like Fred said, are kind of alive. And they're alive because of people. They're alive because of the maintainers, the builders, the designers. They're alive because of the flyers and the people that tested them and that use them to defend our country. And basically, you're all part of it because this airplane here, for almost 30 years, defended our borders. That's what it was. It was built to be an air defense interceptor. And I will say, I got to correct Fred a little, it is a pretty good dogfighter. The problem with dogfighting is you don't want to be seen. And if you notice some pictures there I brought, there's some two F-16s flying formations with two F-106s. They're smaller. And the problem with the F-106 was in an engagement, as soon as you make a turn, this was like a barn door out there. And so enemy aircraft could see it very easily. We didn't smoke much like the F-4s did. And if you have a smoker, the type of a tail where you've got an engine that puts out a lot of smoke, you can see that. But anyway, it was pretty good. Under 200 knots, it was a little bit, you didn't want to do much aileron. And as you notice, you might ask, well, where's the elevator? Where is the elevator? There's no elevator. They're called elevons. So it's a combination of an elevator and an aileron. And the delta wing is very special. But let me give you a couple little tidbits. I graduated from University of Michigan, ROTC, go blue. And I went into the Air Force in the early 70s and was fortunate enough, after pilot training, to be able to get a 106 to fly. There were F-4s going to Vietnam. Vietnam was kind of winding down, but I was fortunate enough to get on this thing, and it was the best ride I ever could have asked for. Later on, I transitioned to one of the first F-15 Eagle squadrons, and that was great too, but believe me, my heart is with this baby, because this airplane is everything. You can see aesthetically, it's beautiful. It looks fast, and it is fast. And I was one of the FCF quality control test pilots of both the 84th Fighter Interceptor and the 48th. So I got to take these up clean with no tanks and take them up. You got to ring them out, test all the systems, and you get to go as fast as you can. And the B model, actually, this two-seater, was faster than the A models because it was a little lighter. The CG was a little different because there's no fuel tank back, and the fuel tank in the A model comes all the way up to where the second seat is. So the airplane was actually a little faster, and I test flown this many times, and it broke 2.0 on the Mach. The A models, believe it or not, it was very hard back in the day in the 70s to get them much above 1.9, and that passed, but you know, 1.9, 2.0 is always kind of neat to get 2.0. And like Ron here, my buddy I met today who worked on the Hughes MA1 fire control system, he's got his Mach 2 pin because he got to ride in the back seat. So sometimes it was, we got to take people up as well. A couple other things, as you've probably seen, take a look at the charts we brought. This 509 has some really interesting stories. I'll give you the first one that's kind of comical. In the weekends during the 70s, we were allowed as pilots to take these airplanes out and do what they call cross country. You probably noticed some of the Navy airplanes out here today, they're on the cross country. You can go anywhere in the country you want. Back in the day, I guess cost or money was not a big issue. So we had 3 pilots and we thought we were going to take 3 A models and we were going to go off on Friday, come back on Monday, get to go fly across country, see some of our neighbors and friends and family, go anywhere we wanted. And when we got ready to step for the airplanes, the maintenance comes and says, sorry you guys, we only got 1 A model, you're gonna have to take the B model. Well, as a single seat fighter pilot, how many think anybody wants to really fly this? Not very often, because it's a 2-seater. I don't want to fly with somebody in the back seat, let alone I don't want to be in the back seat. So we had to make a decision. So how are we going to work this? We have 2 aircraft, 2 seats in one. How are we going to go across country and divvy this up? So we divvied it up, and Gene Fadala, he was a major, he got the first choice, and he flew the first leg into Tyndall Air Force Base on Friday. And when you go to Tyndall, you go out and you get oysters, and they were about $1 a dozen then. So he had, I know, at least 4 dozen oysters. Then we went for Mexican food, because there was good Mexican food there at Tyndall. And then, of course, we go to Dunkin' Donuts afterwards for dessert. Well, the next morning he gets in, he still had the A model, so he's in the single seat. Me and Doug are in this 509. And after the first leg, he says, guys, I'm sorry, but I had a little diarrhea problem. So the whole seat, the whole inside of the A model was filthy, dirty, smelled. So guess what? He got to ride in the A model the whole weekend. And me and Doug were stuck having to switch seats in the B model. So that's the comical story. 509, it was good. I mean, we loved it, but you just didn't want to fly the B model. It was mainly for training. It was mainly for instrument flying and to train pilots. But the next story, please, when you get time, read the story about 509. I was on alert one night in 1972, and Gary Shepard and Bill Yeager were doing training, air-to-air refueling at night, and Mickey Roundtree was in the A model, and they were on a formation landing at night, and at Hamilton Air Force Base, the runway is about 500 feet wide, and so a 500-foot wide runway is a lot wider than normal, and you can get some funny illusions when you're landing. And they did have white lines that were painted down the runway that would show 150 foot wide, but still, if you're not paying attention and you don't have your glide path right for where you hope to touch down, well anyway, they touched down short, and they ripped the left gear off of this airplane, and they put it in full afterburner. The two-ship took off, they went around, gathered up what was the situation, and the B model came around. They decided to try to land it. There was no foaming on the runway back then, or they didn't foam it, but they landed, and of course, as soon as they put the nose down, the aircraft veered hard left, and on its own, uncontrolled, went across the ramp between parked 106s, didn't hit anything, and then went between two hangars and ended up on a hangar road there at Hamilton Air Force Base. And you can read the story, it's amazing. And Bill and Gary walked away, they got out of the cockpit, they shut the engine down, and the airplane obviously flew again and again. So there was something about that story, the 509 is just wonderful. Anyway, so we know about the speed, the armament. You might ask, well, where's the armament? There's nothing hanging from the airplane. Well, there's an engine bay. There's an armament bay there, and the bay doors come out 3,000 psi. We'll open the doors in about 1.5 seconds. The rails come down. The 4 missiles, we had 2 AIM-4Gs, which are IR missiles, infrared, and then 2 AIM-4F missiles, which are radar seeking. And that's what the main missile was. And they had doors that open, rails come down, you tickle the button, and off the missiles go. Well, the problem with those missiles back there, sorry, they were Falcon Hughes missiles. They didn't have much of a proximity fuse, so we called them hit tiles, not missiles, because they had to hit the airplane they were aiming at, and the odds of that are pretty slim. Nowadays, all the missiles are super sophisticated. So they weren't very good, but the thing that saved this airplane, which saved the country, and the Russians, we think, never wanted to get near it, was the nuclear Genie AR-2A rocket, which was nestled in the bay between the missiles, and it was a Mach 3 rocket, very kind of crude, and it had a 1.5 kiloton nuclear warhead. And when it dropped, bays open, there was a lanyard to it, it would drop down, the lanyard would pull off the rocket, and then it would ignite, and they did all that in 0.23 seconds. And then it would launch at Mach 3, about 8-mile range, and the plan was that nuclear blast would then destroy a whole fleet of Bear 1s or Bison bombers coming in from Russia. And so that was a real deterrent, because the Ruskies knew any kind of formation of bombers coming in, one nuke from 106 is going to take them all out. We had an escape maneuver because we also, the shock wave they figured for a 1.5 kiloton would possibly affect our airplane. So we had a special escape maneuver, had to do max G, turn around, we had an eye patch, had to put the eye patch down so you could save one eye and not lose just like both eyes. So this was a great airplane for that. Anyway, that's the armament. Let me mention a couple other things. We pulled 5-minute alert, 15-minute alert for the nukes, and we also occasionally had a home alert at 30-minute. So I'm at Castle Air Force Base, and I have the alert truck at the house. My folks happen to show up and spend the weekend. my dad parks his Porsche behind the alert truck. At 3 in the morning, I get a call, there's a scramble, come to the base. I hop in the alert truck and back right into his car. So he was not a happy camper. And Dave knows I still have that car today, and I've had to replace the front bumper. Anyway, also, so we had this wing loading is about 43 pounds per square foot, which is great. That means the airplane can turn. It's got, as long as you have speed, and of course, in dogfighting, speed is life. We had the Pratt & Whitney J75-17 engine. The F-105 had the J75-19 engine. Both very powerful engines, 25,000 pounds of thrust and afterburner. And the 105 was really the fastest on the deck. And at Red Flag one year, we were having an engagement against the F5 and the 105s, and they were down low on the deck. And I pushed the airplane down to engage him to try to get a shot on him. And he was going full blower, and I thought, well, I could catch him. But, well, the problem with the 106 was, not a problem, but the wing tanks that were, not on this jet here, but the wing tanks were developed a couple times, and they became so streamlined that you wouldn't lose much performance other than they created a little bit of lift. And so I had full nose down trim, full stick forward to keep the airplane down to try to get to the 105, and couldn't do it. So that was one of the limitations at low altitude, where there's a lot of air and you're trying to go as fast as you can. You had to back off. You just couldn't get the airplane to go down. We also carried 1,500 gallons of internal fuel, and the tanks each carried 360. So that gave us a range of about 1,500 miles, and we cruised at 0.93 Mach. Now, most of your airliners cruise about 0.8, maybe 0.85, some of the newer airliners. But believe it or not, 0.93, that's over 9 miles a minute. So you're going to get somewhere pretty fast. So it's a great airplane for cross country and for just cruising around. So lastly, well, let me give you one other little bit of a. When I got in the Air Force, I was excited to be the fighter pilot, and I get this checked out on the 106. I'm at Hamilton Air Force Base. I'm a lieutenant, and I say, what's my first mission? I'm going to go out and kill me some wrestling. Colonel says, Lieutenant Jarris, I need you now to fly down to Luke, and I want you to take a whole bunch of sourdough bread down to the Colonel. So that was my first mission. Anyway, thanks for talking. Come see me later if you got questions. I can answer anything.